Hello and welcome to another Reloadly tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to use Reloadly's webhooks. Let's start revisiting the basic concepts of how top-ups work. There are two ways for you to make a top-up, synchronous or asynchronous. The main difference between them is that in a synchronous operation, the call is blocking, meaning you won't get a response from the server until the operation is finished. In the asynchronous scenario, the response is immediate, though the success or failure of the operation is unknown to you at the time. Up to now, the only way you could get confirmation for an asynchronous operation was to regularly poll the server. It went something like this. Your application issues an async top-up request to Reloadly and gets back an operation ID. Then it starts a polling loop asking Reloadly's server for the status of the operation over and over until it finally gets confirmation. This constant polling is a source of waste. Now, with the introduction of webhooks, things got much more efficient. Your application issues an async top-up request, gets back the operation ID, and while Reloadly does the processing, it's free to keep on with other tasks in parallel. Then, when the operation has been carried out, Reloadly makes a callback to your server, thus creating an optimal workflow. Of course, this entails a more complex setup, but it's certainly worth the trouble. In the following section, I'll be showing you a running example using PHP, Docker, ngrok, Bash, GNU Make, and of course, Reloadly API. Let's see it all in action, shall we? Before I show you everything running, I want to get to some details of how it's working, of what is behind the scenes. Let's start examining the PHP script that will be going into the server as the recipient of the callback made by Reloadly's server. It's a very simple script. It starts by validating that the method used to call this script is a post. Then it takes the raw input from the post and tries to parse it as a JSON, which is what we are supposed to be receiving, and that is what Reloadly will be sending over. So then we have a very simple structure. We're going to look for the event type as the main thing, and at the moment all we can get is the airtime transaction status, but this is of course going to be changing over time. So then we have to go and see what is this status, which could be something like success or failure or whatever happened to the operation. And this is how Reloadly server is informing us of what happened. There is quite a lot of other information inside this post body, as we will see in a few moments. And this is the idea of once we got the callback, we shall do some follow-up actions, whatever they are, and that depends, of course, on your particular application. Yeah, so this is pretty much what it is. As you can see, it's a very simple PHP script. It, of course, can be coded in any language of your preference. I am using PHP now just as an example. These are the contents of a very, very simple Docker file. As you can see, we are simply taking from a pre-created image, which is PHP Apache. That means that this has a local Apache server, Apache web server, and a PHP installation, and we are exposing port 8, which means that we are allowing external entities to connect through the regular web port 80. Then we have our make file, which will help us make everything much easier to get going. So we have the build target, which is basically the installation. It will be in charge of building the image that we will need and create the log file that we will use to, well, put there all the information on the requests that are got through the web server. Then we have our start target, which is what brings the server up, and the most important part is here where we have the mapping between the port 8080 and the port 80. That means that in our local machine, our host will be we will have a web server listening to port 8080. and that port will be mapped to the containers port 80. In other words, we are exposing the containers web server through port 8080 of our local machine. And well, the stop will bring everything down, and clean is simply here to re-init the requests.log file. Another tool that we will be using is ngrok. Ngrok is a service that allows us to publicly expose our local host to the internet, and that is important because we need Reloadly to connect to our local environment. If this service was already published to production, we wouldn't really need ngrok, but for the purpose of this presentation I will use it to make a very simple and quick example. Another thing that we will need to get in place is our endpoint set up in our Reloadly dashboard. Here what you're seeing is my dashboard in test mode, and this is the URL for the endpoint of the webhook. If you take a closer look, it's pointing to ngrok, which is something that you will also need to do if you want to use your local host. And one final tool that I will be using is a very simple bash script that I put together to be able to issue asynchronous requests to Reloadly servers. So let's take a quick look at it. Async top up. So here are all the parameters that we'll be using, and you can use this script to issue requests both in sandbox mode or in production mode. And the most important part comes here, where it eventually issues a curl request to the appropriate endpoint, right? So now with all this in place, we can actually run the demo. So let's start by creating the image that we will be using to put together our container, our Docker container. In order to do that, we can issue a simple make build, and there we go. So now we have the image built up. What we need to do is, well, get the server started. So let's do make start. There we go. So now we have our server up and running. What we need now is a way to expose this server publicly over the internet, and for that we are going to use ngrok. This is the command that we are going to use. It's ngrok http 8080, which will simply create a tunnel between our local host and the ngrok servers. And this is working for me because I already have set up the ngrok account and everything else. So if you haven't done it yet, well, you will have to go through all those steps. Important thing is we need a HTTP and HTTPS endpoint. So we will take this URL, gather from here from ngrok, and as you can see, this URL points to my localhost.8080, and that's exactly what we need. So let's copy this, and we are going to use this URL in our Reloadly dashboard. Now from here, from my Reloadly dashboard in developers webhooks, I get to this screen and I will add an endpoint. Now, in order to complete this operation, Reloadly is sending me a verification code to my email, which I will need to copy and paste right here. Now that I have my verification code, I will paste it right here. Okay, so now I am allowed to configure my endpoint. So here I'll be pasting the URL that ngrok got for me. And this is very important. We need to select which service and which event we want to, well, hook up to. At the moment of this recording, there is only one option, so it's very easy. So it's airtime, and the event is airtime transaction status. So I will save. And there we go. I have my airtime status hook configured. So now all I need to do is issue an asynchronous request and watch how Reloadly sends me back a notification once it's done. This is ngrok's admin panel, where we can see every request that is being forwarded by ngrok to our local endpoint. And this will be very much useful to keep track of what Reloadly is sending us over. So now I'm going to use this script that I was showing you before to create an asynchronous top-up operation. And this is the command I can use to issue a test top-up to my own phone number. Okay, there you go, you see the transaction ID. And there we go, here we have all the information from what went on between ngrok and reload this server. So we got a post request, and this is the JSON payload that we received. And just to see what happened on the side of the application, let's take a look at the log file. There we have it. This is what my particular application is doing. It's simply logging what it's got, but at the end it's doing some important stuff post top up. Thank you so much for watching this. My name is Mauro Chokrin. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment right here or reach out to me via email. You can get the code and this presentation from the links right here. Thank you and see you soon. You can get the code for this application from GitHub and download this presentation also using the links you're seeing on your screen right now. See you soon.